What's going on, everybody? And I hope you're enjoying your week so far. NYG Jeffy T85 here. And I'm going to give you guys a very early training camp prediction of some of the things we might be seeing at New York Giants training camp when we get to the beginning of August. The Giants right now are going to be a team that has a lot of young players on their roster, good amount of veterans on the team, and a lot of guys that are going to be competing for roster spots going into this offseason. You got young players on the roster at cornerback, wide receiver, defensive line, offensive line, linebacker, safety, that are all going to try to carve out a niche on this roster going into the beginning of training camp and preseason. You also have a good amount of veterans that have been signed to one-year deals, veteran minimums, maybe even some two-year deals that you can get out of their contract after a season. It's going to be a lot about one thing: competition. What was one of the big things that Joe Schoen wanted to get accomplished during the offseason? Depth. What was one of the big things that Brandon Brown wanted to get accomplished during the offseason? Depth. What was one of the things that Brian Daboll wanted to get accomplished during the offseason? Yes, sir. Depth. Same thing with Mike Kafka and Wink Martindale and all the individual coaches, scouting department, coaching staff, everybody. This team wanted to add depth to the roster, and that's exactly what they did. Now, I already gave you guys, once again, the Giants NFC, the Giants roundabout 2023 version, where I previewed and predicted every single position going into training camp. And now, this is going to be my little bit of an overview of the entire team going into training camp. The roster has changed from where it was since we were in NFL free agency back in April, or March and in April. The NFL draft back in April. Obviously, we had some moves that happened during June. So the roster is a little bit different compared to where it was back in March and April and even May. Now we're going to be talking about what the roster is going to be like heading into training camp and preseason. You might even see some shocking moves that could happen during this training camp and preseason. You could see some guys that look like they could be locks making the roster not exactly be there in the end. Because as we all know, in the NFL, nothing is secure. Nothing is a guarantee. Injuries are going to happen. But the one thing that the Giants made sure that they're going to have going into this big-time training camp and preseason is lots and lots and lots of competition at every single position on this roster. Whether it's cornerback, wide receiver, safety, defensive line, offensive line, interior and tackle, running back, quarterback even has some depth, has some competition in terms of the backup. The Giants wanted to make sure that they were going to be secured and safe going into this training camp. And that's the one thing that I personally have been asking this entire time before we got into the NFL offseason, when we got to the beginning, was the Giants needed to add depth at multiple different positions, and that's exactly what they did. Case in point, the cornerback position. Giants need to add cornerback depth. What did they do? They added players like Leonard Johnson, Amani Oruwariye, and they drafted players like Deonte Banks, Trey Hawkins, Javarius Owens, and signed a couple of players in undrafted free agency, including a Gian Green. What about wide receiver? Giants need to add depth at wide receiver because of the fact they had a lot of guys that were injured. What did they do? Add Jamison Crowder, Jeff Smith, Paris Campbell, re-sign Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and Sterling Shepard. You draft Jalen Hyatt. You sign Bryce Ford Wheaton as an undrafted free agent. You bring back Colin Johnson. You have Wan'Dale Robinson on the roster. And you have depth now at that position. Defensive line. Giants need to add more defensive line on that position too. What do? They added Jordan Riley through the draft. They added a couple of undrafted free agents. They also signed Rakeem Nunez-Roches to a multi-year deal from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and A'Shawn Robinson, formerly of the Los Angeles Rams, to a one-year deal. And you're getting DJ Davidson back as depth. Giants needed to get some interior offensive line help. You got a backup center in J.C. Hausenauer, who was with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, and you draft arguably the best center in this entire draft in John Michael Schmidt. You need some defensive line help. Jordan Riley also got selected in the late rounds. You needed some cornerback depth. Deonte Banks, like I mentioned earlier. Running back depth. Eric Gray in the fifth round. You bring back Matt Breida. You have depth on this roster now that you didn't have before, and that is going to provide a lot more competition for the New York Giants going into this offseason, and that's exactly, as a Giants fan, what you want and what you expect to see going forward. Is you want as much competition as possible on this New York Giants roster the closer we get to the beginning of the NFL season, which is going to begin in about a month. Now, you're probably looking at me and be like, well, Jeff, what are you going to see going into this offseason? Like, what do you expect to see going into this training camp and preseason? I expect to see a fight. Nobody on this team, unless you're a big-time star on this roster, you are not guaranteed a roster spot or a starting spot on this team until you can go out there and prove that you have earned that starting spot going forward. That is what Joe Schoen and Brandon Brown and Brian Daboll have set up going into training camp and preseason. They are going to make sure that you are going to compete and put it all out there on the line in order to make this roster. And that's all I want. That is all Giants fans want. And that's all we expect this football team to do. Is we expect this team, we expect these players to put it all on the line and earn a roster spot, not have it hand given to you. That's one of the biggest problems with this Giants team in the past, is that too many players were just handed a starting spot or handed a roster spot. That's not going to happen now. Like I mentioned, look at the competition on this roster. A lot of these guys are either young players that are either undrafted free agents or late round picks competing to get a roster spot in special teams or as a depth player on this roster, as well as veterans coming in on some on minimum deals and some on one-year prove-it deals to try to earn themselves a long-term contract either with the Giants or going into next year in the offseason free agency. This is what you want. It's going to get the most out of these players. It's going to get the most out of this team. It's going to get the most out of your roster. And it's going to make this team way more tough overall. If you have 53 and more guys pushing to try to make the roster and have nothing given to them. That is going to bring the most out of these players. It's going to bring the most out of your coaching staff, and it's going to bring the most out of your organization and your team. That's what gets me the most excited about this whole situation. I've wanted depth on this roster. I've talked about depth on this roster. I have screamed. Well, I haven't screamed, but I have begged for depth on this roster at every position. And that's exactly what the Giants have made a major priority in most of the areas on the team. Is everything secure? Absolutely not. Are you going to get injuries? You know it. It's the NFL. Injuries, unfortunately, is just part of the game. But this is a big part of what this team can show going into the offseason. Going into the NFL season upcoming. This team has an opportunity right now to really come together as an organization and show what this team is capable of coming into the 2023 season. Why is that? Because the competition on this team is a lot more secure. The competition on this team is a lot more competitive. And a lot of people are going to be fighting for jobs, not just on this Giants team going forward, but going into next year when they become unrestricted free agents again, and they're either looking to re-up with the Giants or they're looking to secure the bag with another organization in 2023 offseason or 2024. The most you can get with the team is competition. And I love what I love what Joe Schoen, Brandon Brown, Brian Daboll, and this Giants organization has done. They have brought in a lot of one-year prove-it players, and they're going to have and get the most out of the competition on this roster going into the offseason or preseason. That is all you can ask for as a fan. That is all you can ask for as a player. That is all you can ask for in a coach. That is all you can ask for in a front office executive, a general manager, assistant general manager, scouting department, head coach, positional coach, player, captain, fan, beat reporter, writer, whatever it is. Competition breeds success. It breeds competitiveness. It breeds excellence. It breeds the most out of your individual players. And it breeds success. And that's the philosophy that Joe Schoen, Brandon Brown, Brian Daboll, and this New York Giants team has put out there going into this season. And it's only going to make this team better. It's only going to make this team stronger. This team is way deeper. This team is deeper. This team is more athletic. This team is faster. This team is stronger. And this team has got a lot more excitement to it. And this team is going to be looking to making a jump. Even after a very surprisingly impressive 9-7-1 season in 2022. Now you're talking about a team that has speed in the skill positions, depth and strength in the run defense, more versatility in the running game, more play concepts being added, more coverage and depth at the cornerback and safety spots, better inside linebacker play, added depth at the pass rush position. And you have a dynamic playmaker at the tight end position. This is all Giants fans have wanted and asked for. And this is what you're going to get. So Giants fans, this is what we wanted going into training camp. A competition between your top level players, back of the end roster guys, fringe players, all duking it out and fighting to get and secure a roster spot on this football team going into the 2023 NFL season. And if you thought 2022 was exciting for Giants fans, wait until 2023. Because it has the makings of what could really be an absolute fun and exciting New York Giants season. 2022 was just the foundation being built. Step one. 2023 is now seeing the foundation take its next step. More layers are being added to the building. And you're seeing the building slowly start to rise to the top. And eventually, 2024 is when you're really going to see the jump on this football team. Because no matter what happens, you're going to be clearing a lot of money off the roster after 2023. You're going to have a ton of money to play with, a much better draft class coming in 2024, and this Giants team can really make the jump into becoming a Super Bowl team in 2024, as long as no setbacks happen in 2023. But be excited, Giants fans. Be elated, because this could be an even more exciting season than what we got in 2022. That's just all I want to talk to you guys about in this video, previewing training camp and preseason. Competitive nature, competition breeds success and breeds better play out of all your players on the roster. So hit that like button if you haven't already and give a sub to NYGJeffyT85. More news updates and chatter surrounding the New York Giants. Turn on the bell for notifications on the next video or short dropping on the channel surrounding the New York Giants. And let me know in the comment section if you are excited for the beginning of training camp and preseason, what competitions you're looking forward to seeing on the Giants roster, who do you think is going to break out during preseason and training camp, and what might be your early 53-man roster final prediction going into training camp this upcoming season. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take it easy, and let's go New York Football Giants. As always, together blue, everyone.